A young, healthy child, well nursed, is, at a year old, a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled. This excerpt comes from Jonathan Swift's essay titled A Modest Proposal for Preventing the Children of Poor People from Becoming a Burden to Their Parents or Country, and for Making Them Beneficial to the Public. I've always been fascinated by statements like this. They're all around us, and I've found them all the way from author Mark Twain to internet memes. So, what is it? Satire. Satire is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose or criticize stupidity, vices, or shortcomings. It can be a subtle nudge or, like Swift's example, a slap to the face. Each time an author writes, they write with a purpose. Swift's purpose was obviously not to get people to eat their children, but rather he used the extreme example to highlight the dire situation of poverty. And I bargain that if you had read that without knowing of its satirical background, that you would be quite disturbed. And that's why, today, I'm going to explain why authors use satire, some innate flaws with it, and some of the best literary examples. There are a few different types of satire to fit its many purposes. The first type is called Juvenalian satire. This is the dark side of humor that makes you feel really bad for laughing. It's also typically scathing and abrasive. Like in A Modest Proposal. And yes, telling people to eat their children for a good cause is hilarious. Another example of this is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. In this book, there's a group of boys that are trapped on an island, and while they're there, they think that there's a beast lurking, and one boy, Simon, he stumbles across this beast, and it turns out that it's actually just human remains. When he goes to spread the news to the other boys, he finds them chanting around a fire, screaming, and in a crazed state of savagery. In the state of irrational thinking, when they see Simon, they think that he's the beast, and they tear him apart with their bare hands and teeth. As a parallel, the adults are at war while the boys are on the island. And to drive the point home further, later in the book, one boy says, "We did everything adults would do. What went wrong?" That was exactly their problem. The second type is called Horatian satire. This is the lighthearted, funny, ironic type. One of my favorite examples of this comes from an episode of The Office titled Diversity Day. And in this episode, everyone in the office gets a literal race card that they put on their forehead, and they have to be treated like the race that they are given for the rest of the day. Many people were very offended by this episode, but it was actually using Horatian satire to expose that sometimes the stereotypes that we give people negatively impact true diversity. So why do authors use this technique then? Well, are you more willing to listen to a dissertation about why racism is bad? Or would you rather watch a group of bumbling idiots walk around in a hilarious way, being so borderline racist that you're so uncomfortable that it is abundantly clear that racism is bad? Satire is the most entertaining way to bring up social issues that would be hard to talk about otherwise. Now you might be thinking, well, if there are so many examples of satire all around us, why don't I ever find them? Am I stupid or something? Well, I can't answer the latter, but I can answer why you may not find it all the time. Satire can be very tricky to spot, unless you know what to look for. If you understand the author's purpose and you find yourself laughing at an ironic situation, and you know how that achieves the author's purpose, then you have found satire. Now, say you're mindlessly scrolling the internet and you see a meme about how hard it is to get to your online Zoom class. You might breathe out your nose a little more forceful than normal in an attempt to laugh, but then you keep scrolling. You have missed the satire. Another problem with satire is that it's dependent on personal experience. One example of this is from The Onion. It's a famous satirical news site. One of their recent articles says, reluctant Democrats holding off on revealing Biden died of a heart attack 6 days ago. If somehow you weren't aware that Biden is roughly 134 years old and in relatively poor health, then you wouldn't understand the satire in the article, leading you to misunderstand it. You see where the thinking comes in? Well, buckle up, because I'm going to tell you where to find some meaningful satire. Some authors seem to just understand the intricacies of satire so well that their books are even deemed necessary for high schoolers to read. The first author is none other than Mark Twain in his book, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. The entire book relies on the idea that Huck is raised in a naturally racist society. This was done to criticize Twain's own society. One example of this is when Huck's pap says, "They said he was a professor in a college and could talk all kinds of languages and knowed everything. And that ain't the worst. They said he could vote." While admitting that a black man knowed more than he does, he is shocked that he could vote. Oh, the irony. Next is another many have read in school, George Orwell's political satire, 1984. This was written in 1949 in the wake of World War II, when Germany and Russia were inching towards totalitarian regimes. The book is a Juvenilean style satire. That's the dark and scary kind. About what could happen if government is not kept in check. To prove his points, he uses irony and exaggeration. The motto of the country is, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." And many characters in the book even sincerely believe that 2 + 2 = 5, just because the government says that it is 5. The book clearly warns of government overreach, restriction of speech, and restriction of ideas. Sorry. A few things that you could argue are happening now, and if they continue, Orwell's exaggerations may prove true. Both the Horatian style of Huck Finn and the Juvenilean style of 1984 are important to be able to comprehend if you want to find satire for yourself. If you find something ironic, exaggerated, or that conjures a laugh, ask yourself what the author wants you to think about. To summarize, we have talked about the different types of satire, how authors use it to address social issues like racism or corrupt governments, and why they use humor and irony to achieve their purpose. We also see that it's not without flaw. If it's too subtle, then it's easily overlooked, especially if you don't have any experience in the subject. Now, I hope that as we've gone over some of these examples today, that many of you may have even read in high school and forgotten about, that you would go back to these books, read past the plot, rediscover the true purpose of the writings, or, better yet, find some for yourself. I'm not your mom.